we are getting started. This is very exciting. As everybody knows, this is a special edition, extra special edition. This is a special edition on multiple levels. But to start out, this is Wednesday. It's St. Patrick's Day. It's a national holiday in Ireland. So Luke is not working, but Luke is working, and Luke is here to work with us. Okay, good. We got some peeps in there. We got some peeps in the crowd already saying hello. That's nice. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is very exciting to be here in number 35, meetup number 35 of the Data on Kubernetes community. Gorka, can we get the links on my screen just in case someone doesn't know where we are on Slack, on Twitter, on LinkedIn? We're in all these different places. You can see that I'm wearing some lovely Irish themed pajama pants. There's also a tweet that's gone out about that. We'll have to see what kind of pajama pants Luke is wearing later. Luke is an extremely special guest in many senses of the word guest. Unfortunately, we're not physically in the same space sharing a pint of Guinness, but I have a feeling that by the end of 2021, or certainly by the end of 2022, that will be a reality. Luke is no stranger to danger. He was a diplomat for 15 years. He's going to explain a little bit about that later. He had a fancy passport. I want to know what was in that fancy passport. I want to know what kind of, just by chance has it here on his desk, ready to go at any point in time. Keeps the diplomatic passport. Anyway, Luke Feeney, TerminusDB, you've got a lot of talking to do, so I'm going to shut up. Luke, who are you?
Hello. So happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. I brought my customary pint of Guinness with me.
It's the first. This is the first one.
Yeah, 4 p.m. Okay. So I couldn't have really gone much earlier than this. Of course, all the public houses are closed here, so this is the best I'm going to be able to do for the day is have a pint of Guinness with the lovely Data on Kubernetes community. So I'm Luke Feeney. I'm from TerminusDB. We're an open source graph database based out of Dublin, Ireland. And I'm really very happy to be here today. I have to say that this, I've been relatively recently introduced to this community, and it's fantastic. You have, one of the best community organizers out there, and I'm in a bunch of these different communities, and it's rare that you get the kind of, rap skills combined with data knowledge, combined with just endless Big Lebowski quotes, and I don't really see what more you could ask for in a Data on Kubernetes or any other community for that matter.
This is a good point. And I think this will be a bit of a challenge as to how many Big Lebowski references we can get into a single meetup. Among other things. Okay, Luke. So the thing is, you have an interesting background. My background's a little bit atypical. Some people may be aware of it, may not be. I did not study technology. I don't believe you did either. What did you study?
No, I'm not a technologist either, no.
What did you study?
So I studied philosophy in university. Okay. So it was all Animal House basically all the time. And then I went on to the International European Relations. So I then applied to the Irish Civil Service and to the diplomatic service and spent 15 years in there, kind of worked in the embassies in South Africa and the embassy in Greece. And my most recent job was I was the head of the Irish government's Brexit communications unit, so coordinating and delivering the large-scale communications campaign around the Brexit negotiations and the aftermath thereof. So kind of trying to put out the Irish government's position and communicate that across all the noise that was coming from the UK on Brexit. And then I was approached by some people I knew. My brother is the CEO.
You know him. You know him quite well.
And I knew his partner in crime is a guy called Gavin Mendel-Gleeson, who's our CTO. And they were researchers in Trinity College in Dublin, working on big data projects. And
did you study philosophy there as well?
Yeah.
Trinity College, which coincidentally, as we already spoke, my dad studied philosophy. Shout out to my dad. In Trinity College in 1975. So perhaps that's why we're all here together now. But anyway, so you got approached by your brother and Gavin, and you're like, hey, I've done communication.
Why not? No.
Yeah, I've done diplomacy.
I know nothing about this. I know.
But you're obviously a person who likes a challenge. You're obviously a person who likes a challenge. I mean, what did your experience been with databases up until that point?
Oh, zero. Almost zero. So
that's really cool. And I think it's really cool that you're that upfront about it, because why not?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. I don't want to get asked any hard questions, you know.
You can, that being said, you can still ask any question you want in the chat, and if we can't answer it, his brother Kevin or Gavin can definitely take over later.
Oh no, we can definitely answer them. You know, it's funny. You know, like everything is kind of about people. You know, in this world,
Agreed.
It's about people and how they interact with things and how they use things and how they feel about using things. And you know, diplomacy is like that as well. You know, it's all kind of, everything is kind of sales, I suppose. Everything is kind of understanding what people need, what people want, how you can provide them what they want, understanding, you know, how you fit into a broader ecosystem. And especially if you're selling enterprise software. I don't know if anybody out there, I mean, Kubernetes obviously is a big one for enterprise engagements because it's becoming ever more popular with large enterprises, the way to deploy. There's always lots of, you know, Byzantine intricacy in understanding what an enterprise wants and how you can get something over the line to sell to them to meet all of the stakeholders' requirements, because you're never just selling to a single engineer or a single DevOps or anything like that, or even a single architect. You're always kind of selling to multi-layers within a business and trying to make them understand the value. And you know, anybody who's a technologist will understand how difficult it is to really describe the value of something like Kubernetes to business people. You know, it's all just, well, you know, we have computers that work, so let's just use the computers that work. And people are like, well, no, there's a better way and it'll do this. And you're trying to break things down into operational efficiency and really come at it from that angle. So I think, like, you know, in technology, there's just a lot of transferable skills that are important about taking what we do and communicating that as effectively as possible to as broad range of people as possible so that they can understand. And, you know, if you can't do that, then it's, there's no point, you know. I don't know if people, I'll post the link afterwards, but I'm a great, I go back to this blog by the guys from Rethink DB.
Okay.
And they've got a great blog about why Rethink failed. And it's really about that. It's about, like, fundamentally, it's about not understanding people and what people want. And they failed because Mongo outcompeted them. And what Mongo did was, you know, made people heroes today. And that's what developers, that's what people want to be. It's like, hey, I want to get an application up, you know, I just want to get a load of JSON in here. I don't want to have to mess around with lots of complex schema or anything else. I need an application that's going to run tomorrow, and I'll worry about longer term costs down the line. And I know that's, you know, that's sacrilege in many fronts, and especially in our world where we're coming from knowledge graphs. But there's a lot of truth there about, like, you know, what people want and what people want to get from technology, even technologists. And I don't know, I'm sure everybody here has seen that great meme with the two bunny rabbits or bears, and the one guy from the audience is, or the speaker is saying that that, you know, he chose MySQL for these bunch of reasons and blah blah blah, and then the guy in the audience stands up, who's the other bunny rabbit, and says that MongoDB is web scale, and you know, sharding is the secret sauce that makes it web scale, and says lots of things that are kind of obviously silly, and is presented as a very naive technologist and web developer to the sage user of a relational database management system. And I'm always sympathetic to the kind of charlatan in the audience, to be honest, because he's, you know, he's human and he's raw and he's real. You know, he might be an animated bunny rabbit, but he's got a lot of humanity to him as well. And I know that's not kind of the way it is, but you know, anybody who's trying to get an alternative no SQL database off the ground will see that there's a lot of resistance to kind of from very traditional relational thinking, SQL thinking. And that's been something that's kind of, you know, guided the way that I've thought about it and the way that I've come to, you know, feel about databases and database land. And there's a lot of psychology in there. There's a lot of, like, back end psychology, and everybody here will know that. You know, if it didn't get started developed in 1975, then don't bother. Whereas you get front end, it's like we got React. Now suddenly we got Svelte. You know, there's another thing tomorrow. You know, there's a new framework. Let's go. let's all adopt a new framework suddenly and we're on to the next thing. And Angular, whoa, let's go. Whereas it's like, no, if it's not Postgres, then I just don't want to know, and there's a very different mentality around people developing data technology from databases than people who are developing those front-end things. And, and whether one thing is justified or not, it's just a very interesting division that you see out there. Anyway, I've digressed a little bit from where I started.
That is one hell of a Guinness you're drinking. That's all I got to say. That is impressive. That's impressive. And the thing is, I just got a tweet out saying the first and hopefully not the last time that someone mentions the Big Lebowski, Brexit, Rethink DB, and the words Byzantine intricacy within 5 minutes. Trinity College Dublin, you should be proud of your graduates. This is incredible. This is great. But seriously, I love the vision. And being a diplomat, you have so many stakeholders doing communication for Brexit. You have lots of tension and you have lots of colliding worldviews, obviously. But you still have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, use empathy in terms of understand where they're coming from. And we've talked about this multiple times in these meetups about the, technology clashes are really maybe sometimes more about personality or about legacy or about comfort zones or like all these different things. And so as you said, the sort of the back end psychology, that's a phrase that hasn't been used before that we'll definitely be using again, because we've had plenty of Postgres folks that are very adamant about it and say, look, it's battle tested. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Another thing about Postgres, and this segues very nicely, is that you have a piece of news about Python that you would like to share on this oh so holy day of St. Patrick.
Absolutely. So as you know, St. Patrick chased all the snakes into the sea, and as such, Ireland has no snakes. Still today, well, we have some snakes you can bring around, but we are launching our Python client 1.0 today. So the TerminusDB Python client 1.0 is now live out there in the world. So get them while they're hot. They won't last forever. So download your Python client so you can interact with TerminusDB from Python natively. Hopefully the Python, and obviously St. Patrick chasing snakes into the sea and it being Python, it all came together beautifully as a day. And I have a lovely graphic, which I'll post up afterwards of.
Good. Well, yeah, speaking of graphics, we shouldn't detain you anymore. Jump right into your presentation. Yeah. Go for it.
I'll whip them up. Like, as I was saying to you before it came on, that I'm always very conscious of people listening to the podcast. So my presentation is only limited, and I'll try and talk as much as possible and not rely on the slides too much.
Yeah, we can always link the slides to it as well. No problem.
Yeah, but like I still, it's not quite the same, I always find. So here we are, diplomatic answer to the meaning of data, Kubernetes, and everything. So here's the announcement, as mentioned. So get the TerminusDB Python client 1.0 before St. Paddy chases it away. Happy St. Patrick's Day. You can see all those little Python-ish fellas running away from St. Patrick. This chap dressed up as St. Patrick is our logo, or our mascot. He's a cow.
And can I stop you there? That mascot, whose idea was that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so it's a cow duck. It's half cow, half duck. So one of our Rust engineers, so we re-implemented our storage layer in Rust, and when he was giving his first demonstration, he gave a story about a cow that liked a duck, but the duck didn't like the cow, in order to show some of the fundamentals of the database, and that was born out of that we became a cow duck. It also kind of appeals to us because we're like GitHub, but for data. At least our SaaS offering attempts to be that, and I'll talk more about that later. But they have the Octo kitty, GitHub. So they again have taken an octopus and mashed it together with the kitten, and we have taken a cow and mashed it together with a duck.
Wow.
That's it.
Philosophy was not the only thing you studied at Trinity.
There you go. Anybody who's, only waking up in the morning, you haven't come back to the 1970s to talk about, acid trips. This is real life.
Bowling.
So as we know, the answer to data, Kubernetes, and everything is 42. So, yeah, I was just we kind of discussed it a little bit, but here's a photograph of me with the president of Ireland. And this is back in my diplomatic life. We were actually on a state visit to Croatia. And here's another photograph of me visiting a refugee camp in Greece. So yeah, I spent 15 years, working with politicians and working with the diplomatic service. And I really think that there's a lot of lessons. Diplomats are peculiar public servants insofar as you're thrown out into the wild a lot. You arrive in a country like Greece, and you're just told, especially when you come from a country like Ireland, where we don't have a very large international system. We don't have kind of, embassies like you Americans might have, where, you might have 500 people working in the embassy. We have 3 diplomats, and you get very little. So you have to go and create your own network and create your own structure and create your own ability to get your job done. So it is.
And I think it's another reason. I think it's another reason too, when folks might see like, Luke, what are you doing in a startup? It's like, well, what I was doing was precisely that.
Yeah, exactly. And you just kind of have to get it done, and you just have to go out and build it. So there is a lot of crossover, I'd say, in inclination there. And then I'll just talk a little bit about TerminusDB's history. Obviously, we're a spin out from Trinity College in Dublin. And back in kind of 2015, we begin, because we win a big European-wide. So we're relatively new as a project, and then ever newer as a company. We spun out in 2018. And so we launched our first open source database, which was just the server in October 2019, so just the query engine, and then with the distributed storage layer in January of last year. So, as a project and as an enterprise, we're relatively young and kind of, trying to find our way in the world. But we started in 2015, so we have a big advantage because we got a lot of our theoretical development at least done of the ideas when we were in university. And we won this big Horizon 2020 Europe-wide project for 4 million euros. Horizon 2020 is the European Commission's research grant. And we were leading this consortium of research institutes and universities and some private sector actors to build the software behind something that Bart raised in the chat earlier in the group on Slack, which was this SESHAT project. Unbelievable. Which is a very ambitious project to bring together all of the political and social data sets from all of human history and provide them in a machine readable format.
Could we ask which was the first?
So it's actually a bunch of them. Like there's 9 selected. So based around various kind of traditional centers. So around like Rome and the things that came before there, around the power space and the civilizations that came before there, a couple in the Middle East. And then, there's a whole bunch of them now that have come on board. But like, it's grown to a lot of prominence recently, and people should check this out because there's a chap called Peter Churchin. He's a Russian-American academic, and he's the academic lead of the project. And he, back in 2010, he made a bunch of predictions about a rise in political violence in the United States in 2020 and 2021. So last year, the Atlantic ran an article on him as kind of the oracle who called 2020. Now, he didn't call a pandemic or anything like that, but he did call that there was going to be a big rise in political violence, and from 10 years ago. And that was looking at this data. So doing like grand jury analysis of historical trends, and then making a prediction off the back of that there was going to be a big uptick in political violence in the United States. And so we're building the technical architecture behind the data system. And, we needed a solution that enabled a collaboration from a highly distributed team, because you got all of these various civilizations around the world and people collecting data, and they're non-professional data scientists or curators that are bringing in this data. It's graduate students going to digs or going through universities and putting in the data. And so the data itself isn't particularly large. It's large, but it's not particular. It's not like, IoT sensor data where you're getting billions and billions of data points and putting it all together. So it's large, but not crazy large, but it is incredibly complex because it's information about populations, about carrying capacity, religious rituals, varieties of livestock, you know, whether there were cities, all of this sort of stuff. And then each one of those facts is scoped over the period of which it's likely to be true. So, and, you know, of course, in the historical record, there's just a lot of uncertainty. Did the Indus Valley civilization start in, you know, 460 BC or 454 BC? And, you know, a bunch of disputed points around that. So you have to be able to represent that uncertainty effectively within the database. And we had within our schema the ability to, you know, represent uncertainty, which allowed you to, you know, overcome garbage in, garbage out problems on analysis, where you could either you know, exclude or keep uncertainty when you were doing any statistical analysis on the top. So we, you know, we had ranges with uncertainty bars at endpoints, basically. And so, you know, even for ground facts, you know, we were trying to understand where the provenance was coming from. So where is this ground fact from so people could look at it? Because there's a lot of, you know, fundamentally the biggest problem here is that there's a lot of resistance from historians in any data-driven approach. Like that is absolutely the biggest problem, and they will rip apart anything that is this, because their world is based on narrative. Their world is based on, I extract these points, and from that, I then say that this is the narrative that pertains to this. And when you say, no, I'm going to crunch a whole bunch of data, and I'm going to tell you what the outputs are, they're like, no, that destroys their perception of how their profession works, and you know, has a lot of kind of potential damage to their status. And
well, just is that also you know, we can say even maybe a bit of job protection of seeing that as being a threat, that all of a sudden definitely. If the machines can read all this and draw these conclusions, then I'm somebody that studied humanities, and I understand that their budgets are always being cut, and it's a tough call.
Yeah. And especially if it's, you know, data scientists or people that are historians trained as data scientists that are then picking up the thing, because you then become irrelevant with your drawing out of a thematic from a kind of thing, rather than just having a lot of data and seeing what shakes out, or testing hypotheses against that data to see what is the most likely to be true. And that I posted a link in the group in the Slack earlier about this paper that was in Nature, which was about moralizing gods and complex societies. And there's been a big debate about whether moralizing gods came before the emergence of complex societies. And the data here was able to show that no, moralizing gods came after complex societies, which is very important for our kind of fundamental understanding of how human civilization, how human world comes about, that we create moralizing gods after we have complex societies, or do they come before and we bring them into them? But that was just, you know, you should go and have a look at the Twitter. It became just a war, just an absolute war between historians about that. And it feels like, to us on the outside, it feels like it's not that important a point, but to people on the inside of these things, it's an enormously important point. So we then were like, look, we could implement this in a relational database. You know, it is possible to build a schema that complex, but it's going to be a really difficult modeling task. There's a richness of data, and there's an extension of the taxonomy and the taxonomic information that made it feel like using a knowledge graph, using something that, you know, was schema driven, was going to be more appropriate. And what we found then was that the RDFs, the fundamental building block of our world is RDF, the resource description framework, and the tool chains there were very limited. So we tested out a bunch of databases while we were still in university. We tried out Stardog. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, and Virtuoso, which are two prominent within that world. We really found them lacking in very substantial ways. So we decided to kind of roll our own. So we did a basic implementation, rolling our own to manage the information, and to act as a data quality layer really for what was coming in, and to make sure that we were enforcing schematic controls at the point of entry. And so, you know, that went pretty well, and we had a functioning system. We then, you know, we realized that that was something that was commercially viable, and we decided. Sorry, I'll take a drink of Guinness to keep my throat wet. what a day this is, drinking pints of Guinness on a webinar. So we
How it should be. It's how it should be.
It absolutely should be. If only every day were like this. We then did a big commercial proof of concept when we were still in university with this company called Wolters Kluwer. They're a Dutch-German multinational, and they're big into this kind of technology, so they were willing to kind of give us a try. And in that case, what we did was they had a subsidiary that was the market leader for commercial intelligence in Poland. And they had a bunch of these, incredibly dirty data feeds from, these big old DB2 databases and that were messy, and therefore their schema was incredibly complicated and their agility was basically zero. So if somebody came, wanting anyway off the reservation or off the beaten track query, it was just very difficult for them to implement. So they wanted to increase their agility so that they could sell high value queries to their customers. And the sort of queries that they were interested in were things like, is this guy on a management board at the same time as being a trustee of the company? Or, are there any circular shareholdings here? So this company A owns company B, who owns company C, who owns company D, who owns company A, which is, a good one for the money laundering because you can just move assets around between them. And so they were looking for those sorts of things because they're very high value queries. So a bunch of other ones like that, they gave us a set of queries which they were looking to implement. And we went and we tried to do it on Postgres at that point, but it was too slow. For the types of queries that we were trying to run, it was just too slow. So we then really invested in building out a full database. On the back of this thing called HDT as the storage layer, which is, I think it's actually Spanish. I think it's a Spanish open link data project. And we built it, that the story layer, but our own query engine. And that's the beginning of our query engine as it currently stands. What we built was basically a version graph of the entire Polish economy back to 1990 or 1994, the fall of Warsaw Pact. So you're able to look through time at how business networks formed. You're able to query for all those things. You're able to do those traditional graph database queries that everybody likes, like shortest hop. So, how is Bart related to Luke across 8 hops? And then see who the people are across those hops. And those sorts of things. So then we, at that point, and not to go into too much detail, we spun out, we've been thriving ever since. We released the open source database then in 2019 and again 2020, and then all the way through the pandemic, we've just been trying to polish it up to make it ever a little better.
I need you to stop right there, because Luke, it sounds like there are a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous in all of this.
Yes.
And to maintain the Big Lebowski quotes. But on top of that, did you, by moving away from Postgres, I'm saying we have Postgres folks in our community, and I would definitely like to continue this conversation on Slack. But what was it? You found that Postgres was too slow. I mean, it's no coincidence.
We're in memory.
That Postgres is an elephant and you're a cow duck. So there's an agility test.
So we're in memory, and the important thing is in memory. So we use something called succinct data structures. So we try and basically avoid blowing out cache as much as possible so that we can remain as fast as possible. And we use succinct data structures, which allows us to compress a lot of data into memory. Basically, we approach the theoretic minimum size that we can have that data and allow it to be queryable. And that means that we can get a lot into memory. And obviously, if you've got to go to main memory or anything else, it just slows you down by an order of magnitude. And we just weren't able to implement that on Postgres. Then now there have been people, on Twitter and elsewhere who've told me that there are new magic things in Postgres that would have allowed us to do it, but they're relatively new, I think. But I mean, I'm sure the people in your community, especially the Postgres folk, they know very well that not only can Postgres manage your data, but it can also give you a back rub and make you a cup of tea. It's that agile.
All in one. That's good. Okay.
So anyway, we assessed it, and it was this because we just had to have these very fast queries because you're doing these, you have a multi-billion node graph, and you're trying to find your way across a path within it at high speed. So you have like, unrestrained queries going across that to look for the pathway. And if that's not all held in memory, it just becomes incredibly slow, and the heat death of the universe is just everywhere around,
You're getting a call from a Postgres hitman who's going to take you out.
Exactly, a Postgres hitman. I'll just put my phone on silent there so they can stay away. But,
anyway, keep going.
So that's the big thing, and like it's something that people bring up with us a lot, that being in memory means that you have to scale with memory, and that once you're blowing out main memory, then or once you're blowing out RAM, if your data is too big, it's just not going to fit. And our bet in general is that in memory is the coming thing, and that memory is going to go the way of tape, and it's going to become just much cheaper, and that you're going to see these beefier machines. And like you have these machines with like a terabyte and 4 terabytes of memory coming on stream. So you can fit a lot of data in there using Terminus. Like over a CSV, we get like 10x compression with our succinct memory. So we kind of make things a lot smaller, and that's kind of been our trick. So just to get now to the TerminusDB, why we, what we came out into the world then was we are a graph database, and we want to go for large scale commercial implementations. And we're going to stay proprietary for the moment, and we'll try and sell large analytic solutions. And this is where we first bump into Kubernetes, because we go out to try and sell to banks, because we're trying to sell on the back of anti-money laundering, those sorts of query-oriented approaches, where we can, run those queries 15-30% faster than and better than they currently have, and like we get a bit of traction that way, and a bit of interest that way. But banks are a nightmare to sort of sell to when you're a tiny startup, because they have so much compliance, and you have to have ISOs and all this sort of stuff. And the data, then they're very sensitive about it. A lot of them are still on-prem. A lot of them have, labyrinthine structures within them. So it's just a very difficult place to start. So actually where we saw some success was in retail, was in building predictive analytic pipelines for warehousing. So, I have 30,000 SKUs, so stock keeping units. I want to predict, how much I'm going to need on any one day. And I'd like to build a machine learning pipeline that sucks in all that data into a database like TerminusDB, and then does some sort of learning, and then does some sort of optimization to make sure the right things are going out at the right time, and then just surfaces that up to an operator to tell them what to buy on any particular day. So that's quite well suited to us, because we can do a lot of logical constraints into the database. So we can say, we can program the schema to say that, this is the right size of pallets and that sort of stuff. But, the people that we first engaged with there, and this will probably be of a lot of interest to people out there, they're an Irish supermarket. So, the edge of the world, right on the edge of Europe, about to fall into the Atlantic Ocean. And they told us, we want this on Kubernetes. We want this deployed on Kubernetes. We've got, we want it in AKS, the Azure Kubernetes service. They are a Microsoft customer. Like a lot of retailers don't like AWS because it's Amazon. And they want it on their Kubernetes. And we're like, look, guys, we could just spin this up on a VM, just to be 100% honest with you guys. But they're very keen because they want to learn Kubernetes, because I think it's as people in this community will realize that Kubernetes is one, and that people all over the place are interested in learning how to do deployments that way and looking for opportunities to do it.
That's it, right? It's, sooner rather than later, it's going to become a thing. In the same that we were talking about, that it's not that every historian needs to become a data scientist, but it's not the future. It's the present of their industry. So that's why I think a lot of these things, like, yeah, you can fall in love with a technology or not, but really this is here to stay. Like you said, it's one.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a great sign, because I'm a big fan of the Crossing the Chasm book. I don't know if people have read that, but it's a kind of seminal work on technology adoption. And these are like, laggards. These are late adopters. These aren't the cutting edge technologists who are jumping in with 2 feet. These are, people that have, so where we were sucking data from is a big like DB2 that's built that, it's from like 1985 and stores all the information about things in the warehouse and is very, very messy, has like thousands of columns and all sorts of ridiculous names like, AB3 4876. So you have to do a lot of data archaeology in order to even begin with these sorts of machine learning processes, because you have to find the person that understands what the hell these numbers in this row and column mean. So we, so like it's a great sign, I would say, that customers are asking for this and asking to be deployed that way. So we're more than, we're believers as well. So we definitely believe in data on Kubernetes, and we have a big deployment running there on a Kubernetes, on a small Kubernetes cluster, which is sucking in a lot of data. I saw that. I started to read the Reddit thread that you sent around earlier, and like we're definitely in that world. We're pulling. So we take diffs, basically. We take a diff of database every single day. And it's massive, it's a massive number of changes that take place across those 30,000 stock keeping units. And it's historical as well. So you can roll back to any point in the past, because one of the features of TerminusDB is that it's immutable. So it stores all historical states of the database. So you can always roll back to any place in the past to see exactly what happened.
But I think, in touching on what you mentioned with that Reddit thread, and maybe we can link it, or it's in our Slack if you want to take a look. And a lot, by extension as well, too, with the community, is that until folks realize that there are other people in similar situations, a lot of times you just feel like, oh, well, I'm not a big player in this. We're not really at that level. But once you realize that there are lots of other use cases going on, it's like, okay, this isn't so crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, definitely not so crazy at all. So like, maybe I'll just talk a little bit to what we're all about here insofar as why we did this. Because building a database is a terrible idea. It's to be avoided. Insofar as it's a painful bit of technology, because zero is so high, minimal viable product is a different sort of concept in a database startup, because you can't, I suppose MongoDB did to a certain degree, but like today it feels like if you're not ACID, if you can't give those sorts of guarantees, then who's going to use you? Like, who wants a database that, has memory leaks, or, forgets things, or selectively forgets things, or, sometimes forgets things and sometimes remembers things. And that means that, like, to get to zero from an engineering perspective is just a long way. And therefore, while developers like to build developer tools, there's no doubt about it, getting to zero with the database, that's, ACID and can do some cool stuff, is a difficult task. And so like what we see out in the world is the way that people are collaborating on data is very limited. So people are, using structured, unstructured data. They're distributing it in Excels and CSVs by email and Slack. They're cleaning, reparsing, forecasting, and you get all this ridiculous version control. And then you get people that are using Git. So there's some good tools that are quite good for Git, but we don't really feel that Git is a good one. What are they called? DVC. And DVC is a great community, actually, and actually a good tool for people involved in machine learning that want to run their code and their data along. But it's all built on Git, so it stores changes in lines of text. It doesn't scale very well, and it doesn't have structure or discoverability. You can't, query it, which is a very important part of being a database. And then you have, awkward databases that are centralized, that are, relational databases, and doesn't resolve changes to structure. The truth is that the Git revolution, it just has been just enormous. I mean, it's changed software engineering. It's changed the way people do, and the GitHub revolution that came afterwards as well. I mean, Git is a complex tool, and GitHub definitely makes that easier, but all teams use source control like Git now. And because it's distributed, it allows you to have that provenance, the safety, and the quality and distribution. It's just been a game changer for software engineering. And we need that. We need distributed collaboration for data. And that's what we do. That's what we're all about. And what we think a tool built for collaboration structured data should look like is that it should, have discoverability and schema. So easy retrieval and update programmatically, not just updating a monster CSV like some people do, just these massive CSVs that you use for your machine learning. You got typing and structured entities. So data cleaning and casting should not be constantly resolved. And by marshalling things in and out and rebuilding. And one of the cool things that we do with Terminus Hub, because of our data structures, is that we can pass around kind of whole queryable databases across the internet for very limited amounts of expense on our part, because we are just passing around highly compressed memory cores. So we're not actually doing a lot of compute in the cloud yet. Now we're going to launch a cloud service as it comes, but at the moment, all we're doing is passing around, those highly compressed memory cores that people can then query on their local machine or their local cloud instance, and that just is a super efficient way of doing that communication collaboration. And then it's all based on diffs, so I'm only passing around the diff of the database. So because we can see exactly where the diffs are, we can just pass around the new state of the database. And then having a schema, and we're great believers in schema, we pay attention to schema migration. And then because it's a database, it's scalable to database sizes. We give provenance. We do allow pipelining to work in there because we have a branching structure, so you can take a branch of the database and change it in some way, and you can clone the database. You can roll back, and one of the things you see out in the world is that most of collaboration is kind of the easy thing. It's just a single view. So it's like Google Docs, and where you just get a single view and everybody works on it at the same time. Everything is like that. But we really want to have a kind of local first approach, or a local able approach, where you could take everything offline, work on it, and then sync it back up once you're happy with your changes. So a much more like a Git-like approach, where you can take your coding offline and then sync back up later. Now, that does get into problems around merge conflicts, and merge conflicts can be much more complex in data than they might be in code, because you might have very, very large data sets. But we kind of have some strategies for approaching that, and we're going to, basically that's the task to work on forever. So collaboration is the main reason that we see people using CSVs and Excels, because they machine learning and other people basically are people draw them down from a data warehouse. They take out whatever they want, and then they never put them back in. So you get a shadow data economy within a corporation, whereby it's like, no, I don't want to go and bother the cloud data warehouse engineers. I'm just going to keep working off this CSV. In any case, this is the outputs of my experimentation. So this is the golden thing, and it becomes this kind of secondary economy. So you get this kind of clash between the flexibility of a CSV or similar, and the centralized piece of the data warehouse. So wait a second now. Yeah, so this is TerminusDB now. this is kind of what it looks like. We've got a database. You can see down the bottom there. Any of the listeners, you're just going to have to imagine this. You can see all the commit history. So we have a full commit graph that allows you to see all the commit history, exactly who made which change to the database and when. And you get an ID that comes with that commit. So you can manage all your database and understand exactly the lineage of who changed what. You then can collaborate and share those across your collaborators. You can clone and pull the databases from wherever you are. And then you have these visual schema building tools or data model building tools that allow you to build very, very complex data models. This is the data model for Seshat, which, as you can manage, is very complicated. And it's also available on Terminus Hub for free. So you can download the full Seshat database tomorrow or today, and you can start querying away on it. Then TerminusDB next. We just announced that we raised 3.6 million euros in investment.
How much did you spend on Guinness?
Oh, a lot. Actually, I drank 2 bottles of champagne the night we closed. So that took out a big chunk of it. So it
was Mesopotamian champagne.
It was Mesopotamian champagne, exactly. That was it. So we're kind of now back into growth mode, and we're kind of looking to launch a live cloud service. So and we're looking to kind of move more towards data mesh type implementations.
Okay.
I don't know if people have been kind of following kind of data mesh developments. Wait a second, I'm just gonna.
There is a great data mesh community. Just if anybody wants to check it out, they've been featured in our community as well. And there's some great. I imagine, Luke, you've heard of Zhamak Dehghani.
Yes,
she's amazing. Yes, and I would love to have her on a meetup at some point. But her stuff is absolutely wonderful. So if anybody's interested in data mesh, definitely start with Zhamak Dehghani. And anybody else that you would recommend the data mesh space?
No. It's still just emerging, So the community is good, and it took off amazingly. I was amazed to see that there were sort of 1,000 members within sort of a week or 2 weeks within their Slack. So it obviously resonates. And like the idea basically is, both organizational and technological, that you would, organize your internal teams to be data product owners.
That's it. And that's one of the main things that I've got out of it, is to know exactly who's in charge of what thing. And the other thing about this though, as well, I think it's kind of breaking down this notion that there are technological companies and non-technological companies. Rick Vasquez from Percona, shout out to Rick, said once, that nowadays every company is a tech company, and every university needs to be a technological university, as we were saying earlier about data science and history. And so I think data mesh is a very, very interesting concept that, like you said, puts that ownership, responsibility, visibility, and transparency in organizations, so that it's no doubt about, well, who created this, or where did this come from, or how did this arrive here? I think it's very powerful. So what's Terminus doing related to data mesh?
Yeah, so like we want to allow organizations to be able to kind of provide that ownership to data domain owners. So then they're accountable, as you say, as kind of providing their data as products and distributing that. And then we also, facilitate communication between distributed data across the different locations. And the big thing there is challenging the assumption that you've got to centralize big analytic data to use it efficiently. We think that like in a remote first world, decentralized solutions like our own.
Just for all the listeners, this is Guinness number 2. Yeah, that's
Guinness number 2. I have 4 down here, but I don't think I'm going to get through them all.
Well, yeah, we can extend. We can extend that. We can do an after hours meetup and just talk about the Big Lebowski. That's fine. No, but anyway, it's exciting to see that Terminus is seeing the potential.
Because it's analogous, we think, to the kind of like the way we think about ourselves is like Git a bit, but the way you kind of think about this is that it's analogous to the microservices revolution in code. So rather than everything being managed as a big monolith in the center, you allow teams to kind of manage their own data. And it also means that you don't get it. One of the problems with linked data and ontology driven approaches like the world we come from with knowledge graphs is that people are, they're all architects, and they all want to start off by building an enterprise-wide data model. And I don't know if anybody's worked in a place that has enterprise-wide data models, is that it's guaranteed to be a disaster. Never works, because It just becomes a very bureaucratic process, and it's never finished. It's never perfect. But within a data mesh model, you can allow the definitions to bubble up. So your vocabulary can remain within your team until it kind of clashes and has to become something that you agree on at a data council or some other structure like that. So you can have some more ambiguity around definitions within your team, because different things are going to mean different things to different groups. But the problem at the moment is that the data engineers working on the data warehouse, they don't have any clue about that. They don't know that the marketing team has a different definition of customer.
And that was my next point. Yeah, it's what's the preferred nomenclature, to use the Gillespie again. Is that and this is such a recurring conversation in our community, is that we can talk about technology, but let's also talk about culture and empathy. Is that the marketing people need to understand that a data engineer isn't necessarily going to know what a CTA is or CTR, things like that. But then vice versa, is that, okay, you're very much immersed in one, terminological set, but it doesn't mean that everybody else is going to know that. So the more that we can educate each other, I think it's a really big part of it.
I agree. And the idea would be that you'd have a bunch of TerminusDBs that you'd manage your data in. And because you could spin up a whole bunch, do different things, and then you'd be able to push and pull, because we have the Git semantics on top. So you could push the data, when you have a new update of the data, you push it out to something central like a Terminus sub, and then then any other team is able to interact it from there. So you have a bunch of data products across the enterprise that are provided by different data providers internally or externally, and then people can draw down from them for their analytics as they wish, but they're managed in a distributed way across a whole bunch of different teams. Yep.
Good. Now, other things that we had, because you just mentioned this whole thing about, funding and things of that nature. And we have a quote here. We think TerminusDB has the potential to become the leading platform in the next generation of data architecture. How many bottles of champagne did Sander Volk from Volta Ventures have before he said that?
I don't know how many people have worked in startups, especially startups around funding announcements, but there's no doubt about it that something like this. So I follow this guy called Bob Muglia quite closely, and he's the former CEO of Snowflake. Okay. And obviously we like Snowflake a lot, because obviously they're they created something new. Now it's a data warehouse, and it's not something entirely new, but they moved into the cloud and they did it very effectively. And their data mart is a cool thing. It's a really interesting way to approach how you would distribute data in a way across the internet. Like, we think we have a lot of advantages over them because we just have a lot more flexibility in the way that we can share and collaborate on data, but we think they're kind of starting from a good place and an interesting place. Now, they're obviously a massive company, but Bob Muglia, who was the ousted CEO, so he was the technologist from Microsoft, who had been the CEO through their very rapid growth. But then Frank Slootman came along, and he's like the IPO guy. And he came in and he boasted the price in advance of the IPO, and managed, and he was making something like 50 million a week on his options or something like that. Something insane, Anyway, but Bob Muglia then has given a bunch of presentations recently about how how cloud data warehouses will dominate for this period, and SQL will dominate for this period. But relational knowledge graphs are really the coming thing. And if we look 10 years into the future, it will be that, because SQL, for all its beauty, is running out of headroom. And our query language is WOCL, which is the web object query language, and it's based on data log, which is a very old idea from kind of symbolic logic from an earlier period of AI. So it's a prologue, or it's a limited set of a prologue. And it's just very expressive and very composable, especially as data becomes more complex. You just have to reach for those sorts of solutions if you want to query effectively. So we do see that something like us is going to be the future. Now, whether we're good enough to pull that off is a totally different question, but we really do see that there's something like us. And there's guys like, people in the community might have come across Kraken. They're also a kind of knowledge graph guys. They do hypergraphs, but they're they're based in England. So, obviously being St. Patrick's Day, I'm going to have to kind of, look down on them a little bit.
Yeah. Remind them of the brave Irish not invasion, but invasions of Canada that we spoke about in Slack. But I think that the thing is, but just because there's more than one, actor in the scene, that's a good sign. That means there's energy in this. That means there's action. That means there's stuff happening. So you're in a very dynamic space, and whether it goes one way or another, I think you're doing absolutely fantastic work. One thing as well, because we're talking about distributed systems. In terms of TerminusDB's team, you're all in Ireland. Where are you?
No.
You've been remote first since the beginning, right?
No, we started off being just in my brother's sitting room, in his living room. So that's the Irish version of a Silicon Valley garage. That was exactly it. So we started off in his kitchen and living room, and we were all based here. But then, you find good database engineers in funny places. So we find a really great Dutch engineer called Matthias, and he's the guy, the cow duck guy. He's the Rust engineer. Mm-hmm. And then he had a good pal of his, who's another engineer in the Netherlands. And then we found a good guy in Germany, and we've just kind of spread like that. And, we're all in the European Union still, but we're now remote first, but only since kind of the beginning of the pandemic, and we'll try and keep it up. It's hard remote first, though. I mean, it requires you to have a much greater management overhead than you might otherwise want as an early stage startup. You have to think about things in more detail. You have to plan. You've got a lot more procedure you need to put in place if you want everybody to be productive and working together.
That's a big point because, asynchronous communication is like such a big thing now. And it does simplify some things and it makes other things complicated. And I think one of the things as well, too, once again, this recurring theme is that you do lose out on the human aspect. Like you can't have, you can't go have lunch. Like, yeah, you can drink Guinness over a Zoom call, but that only goes as far as it does.
Yeah, I agree. And like, it's actually more the kind of just, planning out people's work in more detail. And like, otherwise you can be like, okay, we'll just have another 2 minute aside, 2 minute aside, 2 minute aside. And one of the things we use Discord as our office, our virtual office. And it's great. It's great. Amazing. We've really found it to be a game changer for us. And some of the things that are important there is the visibility into who's meeting. So you have voice rooms in Discord and you can just see who's having meetings at any one time. So you can drop in to say hi and make a single point. So you get a lot of that kind of flexibility being able to drop in. But still, it's not the same. It's just not the same as being co-located and all working on the same thing. And I think my view is that for very successful startups, at least in the early stage, technical startups in particular, that having everybody co-located is still going to be very important and an important signal of early success. I think once you get larger and you're able to have that sort of overhead, then you can do a lot more with asynchronous and distributed. But I think early stage it's just such a period of intensity of development and delivery that it's hard to do it otherwise.
Yeah, as well as going through the very exciting rush of being able to work on something and build something. In terms of other questions, if you had to relate yourself to one character from The Big Lebowski, or we can say would relate TerminusDB to one character from The Big Lebowski, who would it be? This is unscripted. Okay, so TerminusDB abides. We can say that.
Of course. It's got to be the dude, man. I don't know. For TerminusDB, maybe Donnie. We're out of our element, but we're not going away, Now, Donnie obviously comes to a bad end, but, Donnie's a cool guy. I like Donnie.
And he lives on. He becomes a distributed data mesh.
Exactly.
Through the ashes from the coffee can.
He doesn't know about Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, but,
but he does know I'm the walrus. Because they don't focus on the things you don't know.
Maybe the nihilists, they were good guys. I don't know. We could be nihilists.
Donnie also is the best.
I'd say MongoDB is probably more of a nihilist because it's got no schema, it's got no structure, no control. It's more MongoDB. I'd like to actually go through the full movie and try and pin a database.
That could be a fun exercise, and I think that's something we could do. We could do over Twitter. We could do it other ways.
Yeah, well, your man, the angry guy. What's the name of the character?
Walter.
Yeah, he's definitely that's Postgres. He's Postgres.
It is also true, going back to Donnie, is that Donnie is the best bowler. Like, I've obviously seen the movie way too many times, but in terms of like, it's only in the last scene or the last part of the film where, spoilers, but where he doesn't have, where his bowling game isn't on top notch. But anyway,
who's Jesus is the real question.
That's a very real question.
Going door to door.
Yeah. In 6 months. Anyway, it's true. But also a phenomenal bowler. So that's interesting. Yeah. And there is ego in the startup world, and there is, dominance and need for identity. And then underneath, someone might have a very dark past, but is trying to reinvent themselves through their database. Anyway, we'll have to have that conversation later.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting conversations around that. Yeah. Around the whole way these worlds work, But this is, and it's nice to kind of finish with what we started, is that when you mentioned at the beginning, this back-end psychology, I think that's a very strong lesson in all of this. And don't get lost in the muck, like what Walter says, I didn't watch my buddies die face down in the muck. Yeah. But like, don't get stuck in all the technical jargon and things like that. That's why I think your perspective is such a valuable one as a diplomat of wide stakeholder map of understanding all the different factors that are coming into this. And so that's just in this conversation, we've talked about the Polish economy. We didn't talk about, I imagine, the heated debates that there will be in Ireland, as I mentioned in Twitter, or I think it was in Slack, about, could a historical database decide which is the best hurling team in Irish history? Yeah, well, subsequent to all of your, to one of your tweets, I have a WhatsApp group with a bunch of my pals from school, and now they're calling me the Shermanator. So...
You're welcome. Anyway, like I said, Luke, this was a fantastic conversation. I don't think it's going to be the only one in 2021. I hope it isn't the only one in 2021, whether it's recorded or not. We may even have to think about doing some kind of a spin-off. But anyway. Well,
I think we should try and combine together for a wrap. I mean, if anybody is listening and they haven't heard the TerminusDB Git for Data wrap, that's something that you definitely got to check out, because we're definitely, MongoDB make great rap musics, make great rap videos. They've got a great play on deploying databases on a Friday night, which is the Shia song. And we decided that we'd make a Git for Data rap as well. So we'll be continuing that tradition, and we'll continue to have more. So if there was a crossover rap that we could do,
there is a crossover rap. There is. I mean,
it's got to be based on NASA's first album. We got to pull something from NASA's first album, Illmatic, and then we can do it.
Oh, so we're going for street cred simultaneously. We're not.
Well, you see, I love, that's my favorite rap album. I'm aging myself. Obviously, that's
okay. That's okay. I mean, I could do the same thing, but okay. But we want to rip off a NAS beat. Tell all the young kids that we made it ourselves. And then put some just lots of TerminusDB, cow duck references, lots of subliminal marketing that's not so subliminal.
That's it.
Okay.
Get some Kubernetes in there, and we're
we'll definitely elbow Kubernetes in there. We'll try to get Guinness to sponsor it as well. So everyone, you have that to look out on for the horizon. Seriously, look, we can talk about that whenever you want. And your rap video will be coming out tomorrow. I'm particularly proud. It's loaded with double meanings and references. And I'm actually thinking, and let me get your feedback on this. I think in the future, and what I might do is that instead of waiting to launch the video, that at least take a look at the lyrics with the speaker to explain some of the double meanings, because a lot of times it's just not going to make sense. Some of them are completely just absurd, but other ones like have a bit of thought behind them. So anyway,
I look forward to it. I'll see what I can decipher at least.
Yeah. That's part of the historic. This is like the Rosetta Stone of hip hop. All right, cool. That being said, we have a tradition in all of our meetups. We've got an amazing guy who you met in the beginning, and Luke speaks Spanish, by the way. He knows how to say I'm tall, and he knows how to say I'm the killer, or the bullfighter, if you want to look at it that way. But Angel is our man in the shadows who's drawing all the wonderful stuff that our speakers are talking about. So Gorka, can you share our screen so Luke can take a look at what Angel did? So we got a lot of different things in there. Wow. We got the St. Patrick's Day reference in many different ways. We got lots of cool multicolored shamrocks reflecting different kinds of all the different things that you were talking about going into databases. Anyway, Angel is extremely, extremely talented. Oh, and
wow.
this is always funny.
Source there. It's one of the things I didn't mention, actually. One of the things that went along in our great history was we actually shifted from GPL to Apache 2.0. So it was a little bit traumatic, our change. So it's great to see the open source in there because it's an important part of our identity.
That is a really important part of your identity that we didn't get to. And I think that's something that's something in our community that we do value a lot is the open source approach, because it comes a lot, once again, certain mentality, certain culture. Gorka, can you share the second picture that I just sent you? Because this is Angel always is very detail oriented. And so he sends me the first version and then always wants to show me another version that he's made a couple of changes to. But yeah, I think the open source thing is huge because that's I mean, it comes with, the good sides and bad sides. Was there a major debate for you in TerminusDB when you were getting started about like, hey, open source or not? There was, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in some ways it's just easier to go for SaaS and just be a SaaS tool or cloud-based tool that's proprietary. But at the same time, we emotionally felt like we should be open source. There's been no top 10 database released that's not open source since 1992, Microsoft Access. So it's very hard to make it in a database world without being open source. It's kind of like a baseline. But still, it was kind of a bit of a debate for us. And then what license to go with is very important as well. So we started with the GPL, with V3, and then we changed to Apache 2.0 just because a lot of people in our community were saying, I want to embed this database. I want to build something on the back of it, and I'm worried about copyleft from GPL. So we actually just changed the whole license, which was a very complex process because anybody who had contributed code, we had to go and get them to sign off on saying that they're going to willing to shift. And everybody was. It was amazing how, willing people were to kind of say, yes, we understand the rationale for this and we'll go ahead. But we kind of felt like we were leaving a good friend behind when we left the GPL.
Yeah.
Because we're hippies at heart.
It's no coincidence that in 1992, something else was happening, which was NAS recording Illmatic. I just checked. I didn't know that off the top of my head. I'm not going to try to front me like, of course I knew that. It says here, 1992 and 1993. Anyway, Luke, fantastic conversation. Enjoy the rest of your St. Patrick's Day. And we'll be seeing you on Slack. We got plenty of questions that we didn't get to, so we're definitely going to continue the conversation there. I really want everyone who's watching or going to be listening to this later, you definitely need to put a Luke in your life. So do it soon. And the Luke abides. Luke,
Hey, Luke,
cheers.
I abide.
Bye-bye. Take care.
See ya.